So my name is Doug Matthews, and I work for a company called Veritas. How many of you have heard of Veritas before? It's a brand new company that's old as new. We're pretty excited about that. We're being spun out as a, and then actually going private equity as a brand new business for part of the Carlyle Group. Sure. I lead a business unit called Information Availability, and that business unit is focused on delivering things like disaster recovery as a service, as well as storage management and other kinds of capabilities. But today we're going to focus in on disaster recovery as a service. And you might ask yourself, well, why would I do that at an OpenStack conference? And the reality is, as a orchestration tool or a data center management tool, OpenStack is a perfect engine and layer in order to orchestrate disaster recovery. So if you think about it as a workload automation and orchestration technology, disaster recovery becomes a workload that you can orchestrate. All right? And in fact, there's a pretty significant amount of interest around disaster recovery as a service in the market today. It's a fairly small market. It's about $500 million or so, growing at over 45% a year as a market space. So there's a very high degree of interest in enterprise and large enterprise on how do I deliver disaster recovery as a service. One compelling underlying trend that you need to be aware of is cloud architectures that support recovery as a service. So you may decide that private cloud is the right architecture. You may decide that maybe you have a public cloud resident application and you need to deliver public cloud to public cloud recovery. But most enterprise solutions are going to be targeted at the hybrid cloud. And those architectures are where the explosive growth in cloud currently resides. So I thought I would just take just a moment and cover off what hybrid cloud is. And the reality is, there's probably 50 different definitions of what hybrid cloud is in the market. Every vendor has an opinion. Got a couple of vendors on the screen for quotes of how they define hybrid cloud. But in reality, it's the intersection of private and public coming together in a combined solution, thus becoming hybrid cloud. And there's a couple of core capabilities that nearly every definition will include. And it's the ability to create one storage namespace so that you've got storage shared amongst all the different cloud form factors, as well as the ability to move business services or workloads seamlessly amongst the cloud components. All right? So they all kind of have those core components. But the reality, and this is a great quote from NetApp, the reality is today's hybrid cloud is very fractured and siloed. And it's very difficult to accomplish that nirvana that was in those other descriptions. This is much closer to reality. How many of you have a hybrid cloud architecture today? A couple of you, so 3 or 4 in the room have hybrid cloud. Do you feel like it's seamless, or is it still difficult to operate in? Yes. Difficult to operate in, yes. So we have a perspective on this as well. When it comes to this fractured landscape, the way that you think about approaching the problem needs to be from an application and information-centric approach. The orchestration of your information and your business services is critical to eliminating that fractured nature of the cloud, of the hybrid cloud. So that kind of leads us to recovery as a service. Because if you can recover a workload anywhere, you can then move that workload anywhere. All right? So that's kind of the foundational conversation. Hopefully, you've now got a sense of hybrid cloud, disaster recovery as a service, what it is, and where the demand is. So let's talk about building a business case for DR as a service. Whenever you start a business case, I suggest that you start with the why. Why would we do it? Very often as a advisor, I'm called in to have a conversation with a customer. They say, come talk to me about how to build disaster recovery as a service. I love to ask the question, why? Why do you want me to come talk to you? And More often than not, I'll get an answer back, well, Gartner says it's the hot trend. Okay? That's not a why, all right? When you think about your business case, start with the why. Why would you want to do this? So some examples are faster recovery time. Maybe today you're traditionally a backup and recovery shop on premise, and you want to get to a more consistent, lower recovery point objective or recovery time objective, RPO and RTO. You want to recover faster, and you want to lose less information in a time of recovery. That's very achievable with the DR as a service implementation. Perhaps you're spending a lot of CapEx maintaining that alternate data center, and you'd like to change the color of money into an OpEx expense line item. That might be a reason for you to think about recovery as a service as an option. It's also typically a lower cost factor because you have higher business agility and less operational expense in general. Okay, so thinking about the why. Another really interesting piece is because if you consider the hybrid cloud architecture, today in your secondary data center, you have to maintain your security alignment and your compliance alignment, and that's a cost of operations. You can outsource that to the cloud provider because they have to do that in their data center for all of their customers. So it removes that burden from your operational staff on the secondary site. That's another reason why people consider moving. There's lots of reasons, but make sure you sit down and really think about and start with why you would go down this path. That will inform many of the decisions you need to make going forward. So once you get past the why, you start to get into the what. The what are we going to build? What do we need for our DR as a service implementation? So your exec summary is all about why, and then you begin to get into the what. And in the what, there's 3 key areas that I suggest you consider. The first is your risk tolerance. Risk tolerance will inform a lot of the decisions you need to make. The second is your investment profile. How do you want to align your expense dollars? Would you prefer more operational expense or more capital expense, as an example? And then finally, there are some key design criteria that you need to think about based on your workload types and your architectures and the ability to easily move into cloud architectures. So we'll drill into each of these a little bit more. Risk in particular, I suggest that you start with reputational risk. This is the most important. So many people will start with financial risk or perhaps compliance. And the reality is those are important, but your business reputation is on the line in a disaster event or a security event. So start by thinking about what is my exposure to risk of my brand in the marketplace and how much am I A, exposed to, and B, willing to tolerate? Because your tolerance may actually be high. You may say it's okay if I have a public-facing outage. Right? When Amazon goes down and Netflix doesn't work, there's significant brand risk there. It hurts both Amazon and Netflix. But you might decide that your external-facing content is not that important. But do give this some significant thought as your first step in thinking about risk. Then you can move into the other areas of risk consideration. Not to minimize them, financial risk is of course significant. You need to think about how much is the cost associated with an outage, because that is the justification of ROI for building out the service. And of course there's compliance and other areas of thought that you should focus into with risk as well. They're on the slide, I won't read them to you. Once you've passed risk, it begins to move into the investment profile. Are you a build or a buy shop? That is one of the really key decisions that you need to make. If you're a build shop, it is very likely that you have a large staff of IT engineers and you consider IT to be a differentiator for your business. Very often I'll go to customers and they want to talk about how expensive it's going to be. You're treating IT as a cost center. So we get into a conversation of, do you perceive IT as a differentiator for your business? And if the answer is no, then why are you in the business of IT? Outsource that. Let someone else manage that for you. There are many providers who will do DR as a service or IT as a service for you. That might be a better route for you. Buy, don't build. All right? But this is a very key architectural decision that should be made up front with a really good understanding of why you're making that decision. Okay? Several other factors can lead into that decision, but the IT as a cost center versus IT as a differentiator is a leading indicator of what is probably the right decision for you. So once you've made that decision, you then get into a number of design criteria that need to be considered. I like to simplify this slide and say there's really 3 factors for recovery as a service. There's predictability, there's automation, and there's simplicity. Predictability, it's an incredibly important deliverable from your recovery as a service architecture. You need to make sure that when things fail, you can recover and that you can meet your SLA targets. That requires testing, that requires automation, that requires all the things that are necessary to ensure that you can actually achieve your objective with constant reporting. So that's just one design criteria. Obviously, automation, simplicity, visibility, others are design criteria that you should consider as you build your what business case. So the nirvana state for recovery as a service is I want to be able to recover all of my workloads anywhere I want, anytime I want to meet my business objectives. That's how you're designing. There's a technical session that is a companion session with this that'll happen immediately after, and we'll talk about the technology that we use and have built to do this work if any of you are interested in that level of depth. So there is one other key element here, and I've simplified this part of the deck dramatically, and it's figuring out which recovery as a service provider or cloud provider you would select. Okay, because in the end, depending on whether you're managing it yourself and cloud is simply a target, or you need a full end-to-end spectrum of services, that will define which provider makes the best sense for you. There are a couple of common decision criteria that you see up here on the screen. I would say that there's hundreds more. They're actually in the slides, so when you get the content that's posted online, you'll be able to see the way that we suggest that you approach the decision criteria of the back-end cloud provider. But mostly it's driven by their ability to recover your workload type. Architecture is important. Their ability to bring you online in the times that you're attempting to recover by, as well as get you back. I think that's an important consideration and a very key question for your provider. Failing in is one thing, getting back is very important. It's a hybrid cloud. It should move seamlessly between all of the architectures. So those are just a couple of the criteria to consider when you select your provider. Finally, I'll let you know that Veritas is in this business, and we're very happy to talk to you about it if you're interested. We do have a solution for both the self-service. It's a software out-of-the-box solution where you can build your own recovery as a service architecture. It's OpenStack based as the management console, and we provide the automation and additional capabilities within OpenStack to recover your service. We've also partnered with HP, who is here at the conference as well, to deliver a managed recovery as a service on the HP Helion Cloud. And there's a little bit of detail here. So I went through that very quickly. It was just a broad brush of the concepts. What questions do you have? Quiet group. There are no questions. I'll assume that I did my job and it shared some part of knowledge. Thank you very much for your time.